So welcome, really pleased to welcome Graeme McDermott to the show. Graeme's the Chief Data Officer at Tempcover. How are you doing, Graeme?
Very well, Michael, on this sunny Friday morning.
It's always good to see you. How's your week been, all right?
It's been a very sunny week, which personally is obviously nice and very good for trading. Always does well when the sun comes out.
I'm a big user anyway, so big shout out to Tempcover anyway. Graeme, I know I introduced you as CDO at Tempcover. Would you like to introduce yourself and the viewers a little bit about yourself?
I always worry when someone starts the question with like, tell us your background or tell us your journey. And I thought about this, and the years are obviously, I think I'm at it's 35 years this year since I entered into a career in data analytics. Clearly, I've had an easy paper round in a face like this, or it could be my mother's Glaswegian genes, I think, probably helped. I started my career in something called actuarial science, which is all of the maths and algorithms behind insurance. So that's life insurance, general insurance, car insurance, you name it. And I studied that at university. I left university and started life as an actuarial analyst. Interestingly, actuarial science actually predates data science by about 300 years. So it's been around for a long time. And I found that I sort of made a really good career out of the data and the analytics side of it in the insurance business. And so whilst I didn't quite finish the last few exams and qualify as an actuary, which is, a real pinnacle if you can make it, it's a tough exam set up to get through. I sort of found myself in this sort of insurance world, really enjoyed it. That's what I wanted to go into. Since then, I've made a career out of, I worked for the AA for 17 years, running various data teams. That's when we first met. I had a brief in my career, 5-year stint at Addison Lee, which was the executive taxi business in London. Got me used to being in London all the time, doing very similar, sort of like taking maybe a sort of London performing data team and a high performance data team. And then most recently, it's now 5 years in September, I'll have been at Tempcover, joined as a board director, getting through a private equity transaction. And now the company's part of the RVU group, who own Uswitch and also own Confused.com. And so a massive enterprise, it's part of the RB group in the US with massive private equity background. So, someone said, I think it summed it up as you were born into data and you spent your whole career in data and you never left. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Because that sometimes when I talk to you, you tell me how long you've been in data. I think that obviously over 30 years now. Sometimes I find that quite hard to believe. I had a chuckle to myself when I was messaging you back the other day, the Peter Pan of data. I think I'll start calling you that now. It made me laugh. I just thought that came into my head when you said how long you've been in data, like 35 years this year.
I once got asked to do a presentation like my life in data. And I did a bit of bad photoshopping where I had my head on Superman and said, I'm the Superman of data, but maybe I should change it up to being the Peter Pan of data. Maybe I should use that.
I know, it sounds good. And I can't actually believe that's 5 years you've been at Tempcover as well. It actually feels like yesterday. Unbelievable. The time's just going so quick. So a really great career in data as well. And I think it's quite telling that even the amount of people I speak to, and even someone this week, when I mention your name, they always speak so highly of you. This is people in senior kind of leadership, running team positions within analytics, data science, engineering. And then one person only this week told me that you were a real mentor to somebody that helped them and not only taught them about the world of data and all the kind of technical side of it, but really helped them with company politics and how to handle themselves within a business as well. I don't even know if this was somebody that worked with you. And this isn't a conversation I have with one person. This is like multiple people over the years. I always get really good things to say about yourself, so that's really good. But looking back as well, can you remember when we first started working together?
I do, in the sense of my memory of it was, I think about 2004 or 5 maybe, you were working in an agency in Bristol.
Sure.
I think we'd done a little bit of work together, because obviously back then, all of the contact was phone. Like we didn't really email each other. It was always phoning each other and saying, I've got this CV, I've got this role. And then I remember you calling me saying, I'm heading back to home. Yeah. I'm going to start up on my own. And I heard this and I remember thinking, I'll never hear from Michael ever again.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think, I think it might have been about a year later, you called me and said, I'm back home. I've started my business, called MBN. There's just a few of us. Can we catch up? And the other thing I remember particularly, because you'd gone back home, like your Glaswegian accent was now really thick.
Yeah.
And luckily for me, my parents and my grandparents are all Glaswegians, so I sort of could just about work out what you were telling me. And I think at the time, I was working at the AA. I think we had not long been bought by Saga, and they had gone through this sort of whole wanting to have a preferred supplier list for everything, whether it was like buying software or buying recruitment services. And so we went out to our stable of recruiters and said, it's now a preferred supplier list. You have to abide by these terms, conditions, rates. And of course, a lot of them went, no, not interested.
Yeah.
And you said, actually, I'll play. And the rate wasn't very high, but because you got on the preferred supplier list, with the merger or takeover by Saga of the business, they wanted to bring everything in-house. They wanted to expand. And so actually you said to me, well, I ended up picking up loads of roles that all those other agencies would have got because I came on the preferred supplier list. And I think that sort of stuck. And then our relationship has gone on from there. And that's nearly 20 years ago.
I know,
we've known each other.
unbelievable. It was a great account for us at MBN, and there was a lot of people like yourself who back in the early days when you're starting your business, it just gave you that chance. And in a way, we kind of really took the chance and held on to it. And it lasted a good few years all through the kind of SaaS tech days. I think we had a team doing a lot of like Java developers and all that as well. That's what helped us get going back at the start, because it had probably been 6 months to the date when I left my last business that I'd have gave you a call. We'd have had a 6 month restriction, so I'd have definitely waited. I know you work with a lot of people over the years, and a lot of people, it's just like business and it's transaction, you're finding them staff, and that's great as well. But from my point of view, I would view you as a friend. Hopefully you think that yourself, but we've spoken along over the years. But what point do you think kind of our personal relationship evolved from being just a kind of transactional, I'll find you staff, to being friends?
I think there's a few like standout moments for me. So like I remember, I can't even remember what year it was, but I do get this picture does come up on my phone every so often to remind me. And you invited, there was a data event on a boat on the Thames.
Right, yeah.
You invited me as a guest of your table. Your table was pretty much all MBN staff. It's a staff event, but you invited me to be on your table. And so actually, I thought, you're either calling me staff or you're calling me a friend. Yeah. And we hung out and we had a good night. And then after that, we would quite often meet each other with yourself and some of the other guys from MBN who've been there for a long time. We'd meet at events and we'd always have a chat. And it was always there's a bit of a chat about work, but there's also a chat about life, what's going on. I know for a fact, like you're one of the very few work people that actually has my personal mobile. Yeah. Very few people have my personal mobile. At one point, I think even my parents didn't have my personal mobile number because they just called me on my work one because that's the one I was always on. Yeah. So I think, you still have that today. And I think in the last umpteen years, our conversations over WhatsApp are much more about you telling me about your son, like you're very proud of your son and his football. Yeah. You telling me about your ice baths during COVID was hilarious. We follow each other on Strava. Yeah. So like, I know when you're out running, I know when you're not out running, maybe because you're injured. You can see when I'm running or walking. But yeah, I think it morphs into a friendship relationship. I think where it became important for me was like when we did have roles subsequent to that and we were able to use you rather than having to go through the supplier list, I could call you and say, got this role. And you would say, yeah, I'll make sure I put our best man on it. Yeah. Like we may not be in a big account, but you always made sure you looked after us to make sure we got the best treatment. No,
definitely. And I think just probably you're one person that I could pick the phone up at any time and probably text you far too early in the morning now and again as well. When in for runs, you forget what time people are up at in the morning. I'm up early, but it's good to have people you've worked with who you can probably live through tough times in business as well, where you can maybe give somebody a call or send them a message and maybe get a steer on the market from your side of things as well. And I think the kind of Scottish connections with your parents as well is always goes a long way with the Caledonian club and stuff. Great. So kind of moving on from that, like, as a leader, how do you build trust in relationships that go beyond transactions?
A really interesting question. I think there are definitely like work relationships externally that are very much just a work relationship and they may move on to other companies and it's still a work transaction. How do you build trust in that? I think I'm not a particularly open person. I don't share my private life and talk about what's going on outside. So to me, I've always dealt with it as a work transaction. And so I think what tends to happen is maybe I share something personally or they share something personally and you start to build this relationship that is not just a pure work thing. And actually that's the thing that builds trust because you're being transparent with each other. Like I listen in terms of whether it's LinkedIn, you posting about your son. When I message you sometimes, I know I can be relevant, that I know that your son has just, had trials for so-and-so, et cetera. And so you're talking about it. And I think also like the thing that you do and others would want to aspire to do is like to build that genuine relationship and interest. Like you talk about Tempcover in a good way. You've always talked because you've used the companies that I've often worked at, for example.
Definitely.
The last thing you want is someone that's contacting you saying, I had a really bad experience. Can you help sort it out? No one wants that. No. Maybe that's taking the mickey a bit with your relationship. So yeah, I think there's lots of things that go on. I've seen like you invest in our relationship, which helps us build trust. You're looking for that in people, that they're willing to do that. And you can spot the ones where it's just a transaction. It's too fake. And because I'm someone who won't share stuff, I'm likely to put up barriers, and therefore it doesn't create a trusting relationship.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of look at, it probably changed days a little bit now. It's like you look at people across different industries, the old relationship building, it probably just came quite natural to me. I got on well with people, and again, I don't build friends with every single person I worked with. No, it's good to have good relationships with people.
If you remember, was it last year, I think we met for a pint after work.
So,
we happened to be, like a few times you would say, I'm in London, you're around. No, I'm not. Oh yeah, actually I am. Should we meet for a pint in a pub in, can't remember where it was, near where you were staying or something. We met had a couple of pints, and you said we both posted it on LinkedIn the next day for different reasons, like to just say we caught up together, for example. And like you said, like people contacted you because they went, oh, I didn't know Graeme.
That's
so
right.
they equally said to me, oh, I didn't know Michael, for example.
I know. No, good times. Great. Are there any tough leadership moments that have taught you something lasting in your career? Any that stand out?
I think definitely the ones that troubled me the most was, like, I talk about 17 years at the AA, but actually that time we changed ownership 5 times. Yeah. We were bought and sold 5 times. And then I've done that in subsequent companies. And when that happens, you get new investors, new C-suite, and a new strategy where you're going to go. The result of that often is change. You'll see change around the company. You'll see change in your own team. In my respect, like running data analytics teams, I will see change. And in all of them, that change can be positive and negative. Some of the worst ones, I think, are when it's particularly negative, and where maybe I see it as it's short-termism, because I think in the long term, the right thing to do is this. I remember a previous boss of mine saying to me, Graeme, you're always right. You're just not always right at the time. Okay. I remember thinking, what are you talking about? And then we talked about it, and he was saying, you may be right in the long term. For the short or medium term, that may not be the right thing to do. Right? So don't let that I'm always right thing muddy the water. You might have to do the right thing in the short term. I think like that's stayed with me for a long time. And I think where it troubles me is when I remember having to like make one of my analysts redundant. I made the role redundant. He was my best analyst. He'd been with me for 15 years. He was also a friend, I think. Yeah. But actually, I knew there was an opportunity for him to do something. So I did check with him first and say, there is an opportunity. You've always joked about it. Do you want to do it? Yeah. And he said, I'll let you know in a day. He phoned me back in a couple of hours and said, yeah, do it. Because if I take the money, I can go and do something else. I can evolve my life. And so I felt better that I would not have wanted to have done it. And I think those are the tough leadership moments when you're having to particularly restructure teams. And people say, oh, your team shouldn't be your friends, but you've got to build some relationship with them. Definitely. You can't just see them as lemmings and numbers, etc. To then say, well, we've got 10 today, only need 5, or we've got 40, we need 30. Yeah. And then going through that whole process, you can be very cold and blunt about it. That's not a nice feeling having to do that type of stuff. And I think that's tough as leaders. Oh, definitely. Been starting a company 18 years ago, I could talk all day about some of the lessons and some of the tough decisions I've had to make and stuff like that. And some of the building friendships within business and things happen, and it's just life as well. We could talk about that discussion all day. Definitely. Just judging by some of the companies you spoke about and the growth, like working in, some of them there will be high growth and high pressure environments as well. But could you give someone some advice, maybe stepping into a leadership position within a high growth, high pressure environment for the first time? Yeah, I think if you just separate like the leadership from the position of high growth, high pressure, I think the one thing I did is look around at the other leaders that are in your business or you've experienced in businesses you've worked in. So you look for good leaders for the good attributes. And so you want to replicate those when you're a leader. Yeah. You should also look at bad leaders and learn from bad leaders. That's not how you want to behave or come across. So you shouldn't ignore the bad leaders and say, I can't learn anything from them. You can learn how perhaps not to behave. Yeah. I think people sometimes go a bit blinkered into a role where they're high pressured and they think that maybe they've been in a high pressured role before and then realize it's nothing like the new role, for example. And I think you just got to be honest with yourself that actually do you want that? Yeah. And I think you can get a sense from before you go for the interview, like from the type of company, like for me, I do research into, do I know anyone who's worked there? Do I know anyone who knows anyone that's worked there? What background information can I find before I even have like the interview process, for example? And so you're wanting to find out, like, engage compared to what you're used to. I think also for me, Like actually 20 years I've worked for private equity owned businesses. Those are high growth, high pressured. It's a bit of a roller coaster in terms of like between transactions, but at its peak, it will be very high pressured. That is not what everyone is into.
Definitely.
And for example, I've mentored some people who are at companies that are nothing like that. And they enjoy their job, but they don't want to be in that environment where, for example, there's an ownership change every 3 or 4 years, where your role might be at risk, where you're having to, someone described it as doing a marathon at sprint pace. There's a little break in between, but you are sprinting a marathon. And that just isn't for everybody. I think you've got to be honest with yourself. If you don't think you're like that, don't do it. The other thing is really think about the team you hire. So like hire some good people. I remember a CEO once saying, I don't hire the best people. I hire people who are better than me. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting comment to make. And he said, yeah, I go out and I want to have the best CFO. I want to have the best. I'm the CEO. I'm not CFO. I'm not COO. I'm not CDO. And so actually he would say, I'd go and recruit the best people in their role who are better in that role than me. The thing I do is bring them together. And so actually you realize that the leadership thing is not just about you, but about the team that you build, the foundations that you build. Building solid foundations is really important. I've seen people go in, spend a year or two, it's built on sand, it all collapses, they leave, it all collapses, and they're looking for a new leader for the data function, for example. Not uncommon.
No, definitely. You're hearing so much about that every day across the social media platforms. I think you touched on quite a few interesting points about even the fact that having the right people round about you and looking at people as examples who've maybe done the job and done it well, and also looking at people who maybe haven't done it well as well and learning from both. I think that's a really valid point. And that touches on building the right team. I think having people round about you who are capable and can help drive things forward is so important. And again, just looking at the due diligence on moving from positions. There's a lot of people that may be quite happy in positions and somebody will flag up a new role for them, maybe with an extra 20% on the basic salary, and they'll jump at that. And sometimes the grass is not always greener as well. But again, it's always good to take some risk and move on as well. But I think what you said is so important, that due diligence and really doing your homework before taking on a position.
Yeah, maybe I'm a bad example because I've only ever, on average, moved on every 5 years. Even if you look at my time at the AA, it was largely a couple of years, then probably a 7 or 8 year stint in a role, then 5 years, then another 4 years. So it was a number of stints under different ownership. It was like having a new job every few years because the changes were happening around me. Even my desk, my location changed, my desk changed, my boss changed. I think it was 16 times in 17 years. It was like being in a different business. I always say the grass isn't any greener. It's just a different shade of brown, actually. Like you'll just find it's just as rubbish eventually. So actually sometimes staying where you are, working with it. Yeah. But I can understand people need to move on because they want career progression, they want responsibility and financial reward and recognition for what they've done.
Do you think the landscape's maybe changed recently with the rapid advancement of data-driven businesses?
Yeah, I think a number of things. You only have to look on LinkedIn that the search for like that pinnacle of senior data leader or even one below is always this all-encompassing unicorn. And I think the number of things attached to that unicorn are just growing. So there's the AI onto it, for example, and everything else. And are they just listing buzzwords that aren't really relevant? And some of it is about building confidence. You think you can recruit someone that's going to lead a great data function that's going to add value to your business. Yep. They've got AI, they can build Python, they can do all these other things. Like, I think there's lots of recruiters out there will tell you that the roles that are coming to them that they're trying to place, they're feeding back and saying, you're looking for the wrong person. Yep. Because you're getting to know that business and say, either this person doesn't exist in the market or it's the wrong person for what you need now. Yeah. And some of that is because I think they can get one person is the solution forever, when actually the solution is you might need a certain type of data leader for the first few years, and you might need a different one, particularly for companies that are going from maybe brownfield, bit of a mess, to wanting to go to some sort of perfection, whereas others where they just say, we're stuck in a rut, we need a bit of a kickstart. It's a different type of leader, and you don't always need the same leader forever. So just be accepting that it might be your right one for a couple of years, but you won't be the right one for the future.
100%. Lots of examples on that. And we spoke about that recently as well. Lots of talk about that. No, definitely. So kind of looking back in your career, what stands out as a proud moment and how did it reflect your values and leadership approach?
Wow. After 35 years nearly.
Yep.
There's obviously a lot of opportunity for us at this moment. I think I was reminded of this a few times when I'm sorting out some paperwork and I find the leaving card from, I think, when I left the AA, and the team had nicknamed me Captain McD. And I used to say to them, why am I Captain McD? And they said, that's because actually you're like the captain, like you lead from the front, you're in the trenches with the troops, you roll your sleeves up, you help us out, you support us. You don't just sit somewhere in a lofty room away from us, you're down with us. And they saw that as the captain's role.
Brilliant.
That came to the fore when, I remember when, this was back in 2004-5, Centrica owned the AA, sold the business to private equity, the first transaction. And the transaction was announced in about June, July, and it completed in October, I think it was the end of October 2004. We had until June 1st, the following year, 2005, to migrate all of our systems, processes, and everything over. The bit I led was migrating our humongous data warehouse that had been built as a group system a few years earlier, get that out and get all of our data out and get it over into we didn't data center, right? We had to stand up a data center. We had to get a team. We had to get a migration team in. I think we spent the first few months deciding on a solution, getting some consultants that were going to do it. We couldn't recruit a team fast enough. And then we really had about 5 months, maybe 6 months maximum, to literally build, test, go live. And I remember on the day we went live, I finished at about 3 o'clock in the morning. We had balloons, went live, and all the analysts went, oh, it's not any different. Because all they did is logged in the same details, the different URL, and everything looked the same. We'd managed to rebuild it, keep all of the data pretty much the same. It was faster, modern platform, new servers, but actually to them, it was completely transparent. But actually we'd done as a team, and I remember we celebrated it with a dinner in London for all the consultants and the AA team that were involved in it from tech and from my team. And we had a really good booze up, frankly, in a London restaurant. I got a taxi home to Basingstoke at about 3 o'clock in the morning with a few other people. But it was the pinnacle of celebrating. We'd worked hard as a team and then we celebrated as a team. Like, that was a really important thing.
No, amazing. It's a big honour to be called the captain as well. It's really, good. Like, you can't beat that if you're working on a project like that and seeing it completion. And I think the fact it's been handed over with so much ease where people haven't even noticed is even more testament to the work you've done there. So, brilliant.
Great team.
Yeah, no, you can't beat it. Good night out in London always goes down well with the team as well, I suppose. Get out and enjoying yourselves.
Actually, Joe, it's a funny, I'm not saying it's not really a funny story. That's probably the wrong words, but it was 2005, towards the end of 2005. And do you remember the bombings in London and the bus bomb?
Yeah.
We were at a restaurant that was a few hundred yards down the road from where that went off in the early hours the next morning. So we left, me and a few others, literally got a taxi from London back to bases. And 4 hours later, the bus bomb went off that road, Russell Square. We were just down, we were in Russell Square.
Good
time. So we always remember it.
I know, that's crazy. You think about it. That was back in 2005 as well.
Yeah.
20 years ago. Unreal. Okay, well, one last question I would like to touch on as well. And it's just around what keeps you motivated in your position today and what is in the horizon and that you're excited about.
Yeah, motivation is an interesting one. I remember starting my work career, and actually probably was I was thinking of my summer jobs actually between university. And I remember meeting this guy that was like in his late 50s, early 60s, and he sat in the corner and wore a suit and he just did some statistics all day long and no one wanted to interrupt him. No one could do what he did. And I thought to myself, is that what I want to aspire to be? Like the old guy in the corner that knows everything?
Yeah.
Or do I aspire to be the person that actually knows a lot, but shares it?
Yeah.
And so I think where I've got to in the last 5 years as I head towards retirement, slowing down, maybe doing something different in the last few years, is thinking about how I can give back. So I invest a lot of time, that's my own time in mentoring. I give time to lots of organizations that are trying to engender the awareness and knowledge of data professions in sort of underrepresented groups. So I'm a big supporter of women in data, big supporter of big data and what they're doing in school level. Yeah. And so I think the giving back bit for me is become the motivation, as well as I still get a buzz out of working with data, working with stakeholders. I'm a bit of an insurance geek. I'm not going to lie. I love insurance. Yeah. Helping the company make decisions with data, but also helping other colleagues. Because it's become when I started, you had a few data people and they all sat in a team in the corner and no one ever talked to them. They got requests and they issued the requests and they were annoyed because the requests always iterated. Now data teams are like embedded in the business functions. They work with marketing, they work with finance, they work with the commercial people. And actually they're much closer to solving real world problems. And sometimes they're not, because actually sometimes they don't need a bit of data. They need a gut feel. Like gut feel is allowed to make a decision sometimes, because in the absence of data, your gut can be just as good, to be honest. And so I think that has become my motivation. Horizon, I mean, we can't get through a podcast, we can't get through an interview without talking about Gen AI. Whereas, like, I don't know, I remember you inviting me to an event on the south of the Thames years ago, and I think it was blockchain.
Yeah,
and I never got blockchain. I didn't get into blockchain. It's come and gone a bit, and it's got its use. I think AI arrived. Actually, we all know AI has been around for 50, 60 years. I met a professor who did a PhD in AI in the 60s, and he said it was all theoretical because we didn't have the computing power to do the stuff. He said now, and he held up his laptop, I've got more computing power, or 10 times as much computing power in this laptop alone when I did my PhD. So the AI has been around for a long time. I think Gen AI and the advent of ChatGPT, Gemini, all the different stuff that has made it accessible to everybody is a great tool, but it is a tool. I see it as a really powerful assistant. Definitely. In the same way as when I was growing up, and probably you were growing up, Excel was a really powerful assistant. We all still used Excel, but you can still do some really bad and shocking things with Excel. Treat Gen AI with care and respect. Ask it some really good questions. Like, I've seen people ask it really poor questions and expect it to produce this. No, asking it a really good question, you'll get a really good answer. For me, the horizon in insurance and data analytics is definitely like the Gen AI is your intelligent assistant. Not replacing you, but the intelligent assistant.
No, definitely. I've been on a wee bit of a whistle tour with our round table in different events lately, and it's been like Gen AI and AI readiness and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard it from numerous companies, from startups and large businesses to businesses that are a couple of 100 years old, and certainly exciting times ahead. And I know there is some companies doing really cool stuff. We heard from one of the events the other day, a company doing stuff with like Red Bull.
You've got to think about how it's going to disrupt your business. So I was recruiting last year, and I'm pretty convinced that some of these were like graduates. I'm pretty convinced that they had a LLM running in the background that was deciphering, because some of the answers to the questions were better than I could have answered. And I've got 35 years in data. There's no way that was their answer. It was too textbook.
I've heard some examples recently, let me just say that, where interviews have actually been stopped for like senior kind of high level kind of founding engineers, ML, at senior roles, where the people have just stopped the interview halfway through because they're running some sort of model that's actually just telling them. I don't even know if one was actually speaking for them. It was that advanced. It was unreal. Exciting times. No, definitely.
Maybe you're not real today, Michael.
I know, do you know what? I was actually, before I started, I had to do my trailer, and they came early to get all that sorted. But yesterday I was actually using ChatGPT to see if there was an AI tool where I could just actually record me and talk my trailer, then it would just do my trailer for me. That's how bad I'm getting these days, just to see. But it's easier doing it in person. I think we'll finish here. One theme throughout the whole podcast and through speaking to yourself is, you're talking about a lot of the stuff you're doing recently as mentoring and helping others, but I think there's been a theme throughout your whole career, and probably even before your career in data, where that comes natural to yourself. And if probably spoke to 100 people you've worked with over the years, they would all say how much a mentor you've been, how much you've helped them in their career. So I know you're helping a lot of people at the moment, but there'll be countless people out there who you've 100% helped throughout their career. I spoke to somebody this week who I don't even think worked in the same company as you, but you were a mentor to them and gave them advice and helped them. So we'll finish on that note, Graeme, but honestly, really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. So thanks, Graeme. Have a good day. Thanks for listening to A Class Act. If you've enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow the show so you never miss a conversation. And if you're building a data team or making a key leadership hire, reach out to us at MBN Solution using the link in the show notes.